Hi, it's Marcus Collins with MA Properties for a market update. This evening we're going to be doing Arlington. So we're going to take a look at the first 3 months in the Arlington market and give you a sense of what's happening. We'll look at it in the context of 2021, but also then give our predictions for 2022. So welcome, and so let's get started. So relatively easy to get information today. A little bit more difficult to make sense of it and use it to your advantage, and that's why we really do look at the market in detail. Some might say a little obsessively, but yeah, maybe not, to kind of take a close look at what's happening in the market so we can give you a sense of exactly what's going on. So I'm going to show you an awful lot of information this evening, and what I want to do is, first of all, is give you a sense of where you can find this information. Two sources. Current information you will find on our website. So if you go to MA Properties/statistics, you will find lots and lots of stats for about 50 towns, including Arlington, of course, but for about 50 towns, all kinds of things: inventory levels, absorption rates, sales price distribution, lots and lots of information there. So that's where you can get the most up-to-date information. You may have seen, you may have had delivered in the mail, the Arlington Market Review for 2021-22. There we took a really close look at what's happening in the market. Very, very close. A lot of different areas: single family, condominiums, rentals, and so on. So a lot of different areas within that. If you didn't get a copy and you'd like a copy, it's clearly a very interesting year, 2021. A lot happened with COVID. So if you didn't get a copy and you'd like one, let us know. We can either send you a hard copy or we can send you a link so you can view it online. So that's the Arlington Market Review for 2021-2022. So what is our agenda this evening? We're going to take a look at the single family home market. Then we'll unpack the condominium market and then give you kind of an analysis. What actually is going on in the market? What's driving the market? That we'll cover in that analysis section. And then we'll finish up with the predictions for 2022. Actually, the rest of 2022, I guess, because we're still, Q1 is just finished, which is why we're doing it today anyway. So single family homes. Let's take a look at this. Many of these graphs you will have seen before, but I'll give you a kind of understanding and overview of what they actually mean, what's going on. So first off, the inventory levels. This is a snapshot of how many homes are available to buy on the 1st of the month. So today, 1st of April, when I'm recording this, we went out and looked at how many homes are available to buy today. And that's what you see. The absolute number's not that important. What we're interested in here, and with many of these statistics, it's the same. What are the trends that we're seeing? So we have this information going back to 2006. You can see the crash in the middle there, 2009 to 2012, 13. You can see an increase in the inventory levels caused by the crash. Buyers not having the confidence to come into the market. Once we get to 2013 and really continuing on, you can see a very low inventory level. That's caused by buyer confidence as they come into the market, buying the homes in the town. A little bit of an uptick in that 2019, 2020. I mean, clearly COVID has an impact in that, of course. 2019, if you can remember back that far, it seems like a long time, especially with COVID in between. There was discussion of a housing correction, and that's why you see some slightly inflated or higher inventory levels in specifically the end of 2019, which is when that discussion was occurring. 2020 was COVID, and you can see in 2021 and now with these 3 months of 2022, very low inventory levels as the market kind of rebounds as it kind of comes out of the pandemic. So that's the inventory levels. Question really around, and I kind of hinted at it before, question around why the low inventory. Is that low listings, not that many homes on the market, or is it lots of buyers in the market? So is it supply or demand driven? As I hinted, it's actually demand driven because if you look at the home sales, this is the 10-year picture for home sales. You can see there that Home sales were relatively static in the town for the last decade or so, but definitely took an uptick in 2021. 293 existing homes, that's the blue, with 14 new construction, which is that kind of green color. And then the very small slither of orange, those are the off-market teardowns that get converted to the new construction. So 293 existing homes plus 14 new construction. A high number, higher than we've seen in that 2015, which was the last peak in the market. So lots of homes coming on the market and selling, so that's important. This is home sales, not home listings. As many of you will know, if you've been watching the market, that's caused by prices rising and then sellers coming into the market. So very much the low inventory driven by demand, because the number of home sales is either static, or if you look at 2021 was actually higher. So very much a demand driven market in Arlington. Let's take a kind of look at what's happening this year now. That's kind of 2021. You can see that play out. We like to kind of show this cumulative graph. You can see that slow start. The blue is 2021. The orange color is 2020, excuse me. And it's cumulative, so it kind of adds up as you go along. And you can see a relatively slow start in 2020, but 2021 it kind of took off. And at the end of the year, it was dramatically higher than we saw in 2020. Moving forward now to compare 2021 with 2022, you can see that it's about the same, give or take. So look, it's about 10 homes difference. Quite low in terms of, there's no dramatic increase, or actually what we're looking for, a dramatic decrease in the number of home sales. So it does look like we may well be heading for a similar number of home sales in 2022 that we saw in 2021. You can see this if we look at how the homes that are listed. This is 2 years worth of data, how many homes were listed in any given month. And you can see, hard to see with my cursor I think, but March we were up at about 25 homes, March 2021 about 25 homes. That had increased to 35 in 2022, slightly lower in January, February. But you can see that it does look like we will be heading for similar numbers. And if I take you back to that home sales graph, similar numbers to what we saw in 2021. That's what we can see today. Clearly, as more data comes in, we'll be able to be a little bit more specific about that. But it does look like we're looking for another year with a large number of sales as sellers come into the market, knowing prices are high. Kind of draws sellers into the market, if you like. Days on the market. The graph I have here is for the last 10 years. But I've broken out now 2021 Jan through March Q1 versus 22 Q1. You can see for the whole year of 2021 we're at 15, much lower than we've seen previously. Interestingly, in the first 3 months a year ago in 2021, that number was about 26. So a relatively slow start to the year. Quite common, clearly winters happen in Massachusetts, and it's common to see a slow start to the year, and that's what we saw in 2021. But as you can see in 2022, that just didn't happen. Very little snow this year. The buyers almost didn't take a breath. As soon as Christmas was out of the way, as soon as the holidays were out of the way, they were back into the market. And that's why we see that relatively low number. That's not quite as low as 2021 yet, for the first 3 months of 2022. So, as I say, caused really by buyers coming right back into the market, almost not taking a breath over the winter break. Similar picture when we look at sale price to list price ratio. This is the ratio of the sale price to the list price. So imagine a home comes on the market for $700,000 and sells for $700,000. That would be 100% sale price to list price ratio. In 2021, the average sale price list price ratio, that is the average, was 109, so dramatically higher than we've seen in prior years, clearly. 109 versus 102, even 104 in 2017 and 2018, so much, much higher. You can see, though, in the first 3 months of 2021, only 103%. He says only 103. Clearly, that's a very buoyant market. But as we look at the first 3 months of this year, 110%. So back to that, it looks like that very high number of 109 is going to continue through into 2021. Clearly a great metric to look as to give us a measure really of buyer confidence in the market. That's the key use of this metric. If that number's high, clearly buyers have a large degree or high degree of confidence in the town. If it's low, then clearly they have a lower degree of confidence in the town. So that's important. You can see that difference between that 103 and 110 if we break out about 15 months worth of data. So what you're seeing here, the blue bars are the number of properties that are sold in any given month. And the orange line is the sell price to list price ratio. And if I try and show with the cursor, you can see that in the first 3 months of 2021, it rose, but not that sharply. Whereas here we are in 2022, it rose sharply. And that's the average for March was probably about 115%. So a very high ratio. So clearly a high degree of buyer confidence in the town, and so really they didn't take a breath over the winter break and were right back out looking to buy the homes that came on the market as the year started. Now, with that high degree of buyer confidence, even with a relatively high number of sales, certainly in comparison to historical norms, sale prices are high. The blue here is the historical data, that's the yearly data, all the way up to 2021. And then the green is the month by month for 2022. Clearly a big rise in that 2022 average. We finished off 2021 just shy of 1.1 million. Looks like the running average for this year about 1.25. That's a high number. Again, if you look at the first 3 months, 961,000, excuse me, in Q1 2021, 1.25 million in 2022. A relatively high increase in the average sale price. I'll have more to say about that and its sustainability later on in the webinar. Same is true of median. You can see it here, 900,000 in Q1 2021. 1.1 million. That's about a 22% rise in the median sale price for the first 3 months of 2022. Big increase that, clearly. We'll be watching it undoubtedly to see if that kind of trickles down, as it often does. There aren't that many sales in the first 3 months of the year, and so it takes 1 or 2 high-priced homes or more high-priced homes to kind of skew this a little bit, even the median. Although quite interestingly, I was looking at how many homes sold over $2 million Q1 2021 versus 22. We had 3 in 2021 and 4 in 2022, so not a big difference. So it's not kind of outliers, which the median should begin to kind of cushion out as well, of course. But it does look like we've seen a somewhat dramatic increase in those prices. We'll see over the next quarter, essentially, whether that begins to kind of trickle down to a much more sustainable, arguably, increase or house price appreciation. So time will tell over the next 3 months quite what happens with that. So that was the single family market, clearly a very buoyant market. Let's turn our attention now to the condominium market. Condo sales, we'll go through a similar analysis, as it were, as we look at condominiums. A lot more variability in the condominium sales, as you can see here. Much more up and down. They're far more regular in the single family market. It does tend to kind of jump up and down. But we did see a large number of condominiums, 286 existing, probably 2 new construction. So about 288 condominium sales in 2021. High number, certainly higher than we've seen. Looking at the cumulative, this is what we see here. I showed this before. Cumulative sales, blue is 2021, orange is 2022. You can see that it really rose quickly as soon as we were out of January. Really, 2021 surpassed where we were in 2020, and so it continued throughout the year. The reason those numbers are slightly lower than the numbers you saw previously is I look at cumulative sales based on the under agreement date. And so what I'm doing, the reason I'm doing that is I'm backing out that 6 or 8 week delay between a home going under agreement and actually selling. So that's why cumulative sales, I'm looking here at under agreement. So that's why you see a slight discrepancy in the numbers, if anybody had kind of wondered why there was that small discrepancy. So that was 2021 versus 2020. Let's now look at 2022 versus 2021. And as you can see, a little bit of variability, but we're on track to have roughly the same number of sales. I can't say that with a degree of certainty yet. Need a few more months to kind of get that because there is a degree of variability, but it does look like we are going to see a large number of sales, condominium sales in 2022, probably at about the same level that we saw in 2021, which was clearly higher than we've seen historically. In terms of that sale price to list price ratio, 103 was the average in 2021. And you can see a little bit lower in the Q1 2021, but we ended up on average of 103. And then this year, the first 3 months, similar to what we saw in the single family market, really buyers didn't take a breath. We carried on with that relatively high number. Interesting here though, and we see this not just in Arlington, we see it in other towns too. Condominiums not as buoyant, the market not as buoyant as single family. Remember, single family running at 109% on average for 2021, 103% for 2022 year to date. So not quite as buoyant. Now, having said that, let's kind of put this in perspective. It is still over 100%. Once that drops below 100%, then there's a little bit of reluctance on the buyer's part. But once you're at 104, which if it were it not for last year, we would say it was a very buoyant market at 104%. So, and certainly in comparison to towns around. But certainly condominium market, not as buoyant across the board really, no matter which town you look at, not as buoyant as we've seen in the single family market. So here, looking at the sale price, clearly, the next thing to look at, a relatively minor increase here. So 2021 we're at 721. It finished the year at 712. January through March 2022, 883. If we look now at taking out some of those outliers, looking at the median, 575 for Q1 2021, 812 for 2022. That's a 7% rise. A lot lower than we saw, of course, in the single family market, which looks like it maybe certainly these 3 months anyway, upwards around 20%. So clearly a lot less in the condominium market. So let's take a look now at kind of a broader perspective in terms of what's happening in the market. Excuse me. So two effects. First one is been much talk about, of course, changing housing demands. Buyers, sellers and buyers, the homes they're currently in, if they're a seller, the home the buyers are looking for, their requirements are changing. Perhaps the commute is not as important because they have a hybrid environment, they're only going into the office 2-3 days a week and so on. So changing housing demands, really the primary driver in the market today. There's a little more than that though, of course. There is still turnover in the market were it not for COVID, and that's really to do with some demographic changes that we're seeing in the market in general. So this is a kind of a low level, would be there anyway, and we will get back to it clearly eventually once the COVID effect kind of works its way out of the system. And that's to do with demographics. So here you have a population pyramid. You can see that they're kind of two bumps, males and females is the blue and the red. How many people within each age bracket? If I overlay two interesting areas here, the higher yellow bar is the baby boomers. So those people are now beginning to think about downsizing, which means they're going to sell potentially in a higher priced town or higher priced home, move to a lower priced town or a lower priced home. The lower bar there, the lower yellow bar there, is the first time home buyers, the millennials. So if you think about Arlington, the position it finds itself in, the towns around it, Belmont, Winchester, Lexington, higher priced, in general, higher priced homes in those towns. And so Arlington makes a great destination for somebody living in those towns looking to downsize. They're close to their circle of friends, they're just the next town over, but the average price much lower. For example, in Lexington, about 1.6 million is the average price. Arlington about just over $1 million. So a little bit cheaper, more affordable, maybe the right word, not cheaper, more affordable in Arlington than it is in Lexington or Winchester or Belmont for that matter. So downsizers see Arlington as a great destination. As well as that, though, of course, first-time home buyers moving out of the rentals in Somerville, Cambridge, Boston, looking for that first home, see Arlington's a great destination. It is relatively affordable, and it's close to downtown Boston, got a vibrant town center, good school system, begins to tick all the boxes, essentially. And so we see that Arlington finds itself in this kind of juxtaposition of perfect storm almost, downsizers on the one hand, first-time homebuyers on the other hand, both looking to move into the town. And that's why we see a lot of buyer confidence with in the town, and that's why we see that sale price to list price ratio upwards of 109%. So that's kind of what's driving the market, this underlying demographic shift, and layered on top of that then these changing housing requirements. That's the primary drivers for the market. I should show you about interest rates, because this is quite interesting. The graph you see here, the blue are the actuals, and the green were the predictions, and I've left it here. The predictions we had in early January, which was only 3 months ago. As you can see, they were predicting Q4 2022, we'd be at around 3.7%. It's not quite going to turn out like that. If we look at this very same data month by month, we only have 2 months at the moment. January was at 3.45, February at 3.76. So we are already in February higher than they were predicting at the end for the end of the year. And if we bring it kind of right up to date right now, here's the latest data I downloaded just today. You can see that mortgage rate, similar number to you saw previously, was at 4.67%. So we're clearly a relatively high level of mortgage interest rate. If I kind of scoot back, just to put that in perspective, 4.7 is round about where we were in 2018. So we're getting close to the highest we've seen since 2009. So we are beginning to kind of push up to this high level. So again, the rates we've got, 4.67. Question, of course, and we'll see, as we get a little bit more data and as we get Q3 data finalized, what are the new predictions by the analysts in terms of where we're going to end up at the end of the year? Because this will have, potentially a profound impact on the market. And it's not so much the number. If you ask the analysts, at what number does mortgage interest rates start to have a negative impact on people's ability or willingness perhaps to buy or to pay as much anyway? The number was about 5.5% perhaps. But remember what we've got two effects going on here. First of all, we've got high mortgage interest rates, or higher mortgage interest rates. And we've got high house price appreciation, excuse me. So we've got this kind of two effects kicking in here. And so ability to buy, to pay or to repay a mortgage is a factor of the mortgage interest rates, but also how big the mortgage you need. And so these two effects are beginning to kick in. And so that's why when they talk about 5.5% is when it's going to start having a negative impact on buyers' ability or willingness to pay. I do think that might kind of creep down a little bit because we've got high price appreciation as well. So I would look at 4.67, 5% perhaps, certainly 5.5% would begin to have an impact on buyers' willingness to pay, arguably that 109%. Now, we need to see how long this takes before it plays out. The predictions may be that we stay at 4.7% for the rest of the year. Time will tell. And I think over the next 1 to maybe 3 months, next quarter, it will be interesting to see where that number goes. If it begins to rise quite rapidly, upwards of 5.5%, even 6%, if that's, then I think we will begin to see this having a major impact on, say, buyers' willingness, not necessarily ability, but willingness to pay some of the prices that they have previously. Let me finish off this section with something which actually was announced just a day or two ago. You may have seen it or read it or heard it on the news. Discussion out of the Dallas Fed around, are we beginning to see a housing bubble? And it was kind of interesting if you read the article. It's quite a technical article, but are we beginning to see that a house price appreciation is running at a level that is not sustainable? Ultimately, it says. And it's interesting to look at that because I've been concerned, perhaps, looking at some of these median sell price data for towns which in the past have not necessarily been as strong as, for example, in Arlington. Let me give you just a couple of examples of that. First town I'm going to show you is Wayland. So remember what I said about changing housing demands. Commute, which clearly not as good in Wayland as it, for example, in Arlington, it's always kind of kept the prices a little bit lower. That house price appreciation never really got that kind of steady rise. As you can see, it's had its kind of ups and downs over the last 10 years or so since the crash back in 2012. But look at what we saw in 2021. We saw a dramatic rise, actually a 20% rise in the median sell price. So not the average here, this is the median sell price, a 20% rise. That's a major rise. But now look at what's happening in the first 3 months of this year. It kind of crept back down. We'll see at what level it kind of finishes the year. But I'll be watching this closely over the next, say, 3 months, quarter, just to see if that average is going to go up or down. Where is it going to end up based on what we saw in 2021? Looks, based on the data we have today, like it might be creeping its way down, which means clearly that housing bubble becomes less of a concern because, yes, there was some froth in the market in 2021, but now it's kind of calmed down somewhat. Interestingly, now to look at Sudbury. Now, same effect in terms of 2021, or same impact on prices in 2021. Again, a 20% increase. But now look where house prices are based on the first 3 months of this year. Clearly higher than we saw in 2021, which is interesting to see. We've not seen, I did look to see if we'd had less sales, which might have skewed this somewhat. Often if you get 1 or 2 high-priced homes and there were only 10 or 20 homes that actually sold, then you would expect this kind of high number even with the median. But it does look like that we had roughly the same number of sales in Q1 21 versus Q1 22, and so that's not really having an impact. So will be interesting to see which way these two towns go. Will we see again a further increase in prices in 2022 versus 2021. Not just these towns. I picked these two because it was a relatively difference between them, but also a very stark increase in 2021. Towns like Acton, for example, have a very similar effect. And so towns which arguably had a longer commute and therefore appreciation wasn't quite as high as some of those closer in towns, beginning to see, without changing housing demands, a lot of buyers coming into the town. And the question really is to what is the impact of this moving forward? Is this sustainable, or is it just 1 or 2 year blip and then house prices are gonna kind of scale back down? And so kind of in the context of that housing bubble, it will be interesting to see. Put this in perspective, back here to Arlington, we've seen relatively steady home price appreciation over the last 10 years or so, and it's been sustainable. Again, question, we'll see what happens with that appreciation as we get into 2022. Will it continue at this very high level that we see right now, 1.1 million, in comparison to about 925 in 2021, or will it begin to kind of calm back down? And will interest rates have an impact on that? So there's a lot to kind of think about and look at over the next 3 months or so, as we see the impact of prices. We also see the impact of mortgage interest rates and how those play out and what the impact of that will be. So I wanted to kind of, as that was kind of hot off the press, if you like, I wanted to kind of touch on that subject so you can get a sense of of what are we seeing a similar effect here in Massachusetts as opposed to what's being seen across the country, which is really the focus of that Fed report that I showed you at the beginning. So, predictions. So where are we today, and what do we see for the rest of this year? So we talked a lot about interest rates. I mean, it looks like they're going to rise. Combination of high price appreciation and interest rates will eventually have an impact on buyers' ability or willingness to pay. When that will be, time will tell. But we will begin to look at that as kind of the next 3 months or so progress. So that's something to take a look at. But today anyway, as best we can see, putting that to one side, if that's even makes sense to do that. But it does look like in terms of sellers, we are going to see as many sellers in the market this year as we saw last year, taking advantage of those high home prices, looking to profit take, if you will. So we will see an increased number of sellers, or at least an increase based on historical numbers, similar to what we saw in 2021. So that's on the seller side. On the buyer's side, lots of buyers in the market. As I say, they almost didn't take a breath over the winter break, came right back into the market, and they're out in force. Time will tell, of course, to what extent what we see moving in terms of interest rate will impact on that. But today anyway, it does look like house price appreciation will rise. A very competitive market for today's buyers, even with a relatively high number of listings on the market. And so it's almost business as usual, with the caveat that interest rates are not necessarily at those very, very low numbers that we saw previously. So that's kind of where the buyers are. Still very much a tough market to buy into, is the Arlington market. No surprise there, I think. So with that, gonna kind of wrap up here. Why do we do this? Hopefully you enjoyed it. But we do it because we really do want and think our clients deserve to be the smartest person at the closing table, because if they have that information, we all benefit from becoming smarter about that home buying and home selling process. So that kind of, we think, wraps up in a nutshell, if you like, why we enjoy doing these. I enjoy doing these, and we kind of look at the market very closely. And hopefully you enjoyed this analysis on what we did. We'll do this every month, so there's a lot to cover every month. So every month we'll kind of do this market update, and hopefully you enjoyed that. And with that, I will say good night and thanks for watching. Bye.